Welcome back to Matchbook's weekly NFL podcast, week 15. We're recording a bit later this week with good reason. There's been lots and lots of COVID cases just before we came on air. Got confirmation that Jalen Waddle is now on the COVID list for the Miami Dolphins. Was not a game we were looking at, as we have a kind of a no Jets discussion here ever, if we can at all. Delighted to be joined by the all-star trio of Drew Dinksick, a.k.a. the Whale Capper. How are you, Drew? Bobby Pizza, also known as Rob Pizzola. Loved that video last week. Love it, Rob. We'll get back to that some other stage. And all the way from Western Germany, Mr. Fabian Sommer. Guten Tag, sir. Let's have a quick look at last week, guys. Best bets was I've never gone through a week where there was emotional roller coaster of all. Our three bets were the most, topsy-turvy bets that we ever had. Suma, your one, 49ers and the Bengals over 48.5. I have absolutely no idea how that came up. A lot of stuff had to go right towards the end. Live in play, I think in the third quarter, that line was 31.5. So there you go. But you were due that one, Suma. Drew Dinksick, the Browns minus 2.5. And even with against a backup quarterback, nonetheless, for 3 quarters of football. I'm not totally sure how that didn't win. And Rob Pizzola at the Bills plus 3.5. It gets to overtime. They get the ball first. How does the cover? I don't know. Drew, go first. Where do we start with these ones?
Well, I never lost faith in Suma. I just want that on the record. I knew that was entirely possibly still gonna maybe get there, even when it went to overtime, 20-20. The Browns bet. I'm still scratching my head as to how that happened. It was like watching a car crash. The fact that they couldn't score 1 point in the second half, I think speaks to some of the dysfunction that still exists between that coach and quarterback. A dysfunction which we will not get to really understand any better this week, as both will be unavailable for this game. And realistically, let's put the Browns out of their misery. It may have been better if they had just lost outright, and if the onside kick had been recovered and the Ravens score a field goal, and we could just forget about the Browns as a team this season, that might have been fine. But the piece de resistance of the Bills not coming through with the 3.5 was that was really something to behold.
That was pretty something to behold. Suma, yeah, it was. Look, the weird thing was, Suma, you filed your copy for Insights on a Friday morning, and the main number was 49.5 in that game. So, yeah, that was just a tough one. But Zach Taylor though didn't really help us out until they got behind, and then he decides, hey, we're 2 touchdowns behind. Let's get this offense in a vertical mode and stop running the damn ball.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you watch their games, it's like so many guys on Twitter are analyzing the Bengals offense, and you always get the feeling that Zach Taylor doesn't understand what's going on. So the 49ers defense, they are good against the run. We're playing with backup cornerbacks, and I think in the first half, Taylor called, 10 early down runs, and the best one went for 7 yards, and only one went for more than 4 yards on early down. So it made 0 sense. And then in the second half, finally, when they were trailing, they opened up their passing game, and all of a sudden they can move the ball through the air. It's a pretty rough experience watching the Bengals right now.
Yeah, Rob, I think Drew covered the Bills there. Do you want to just very quickly give us your take on that one? It was a tough one, man.
Yeah, it's painful. I mean, that's the second best bet I've had on this show this year that has been an underdog of more than a field goal, that's gone to overtime, got the first possession, and still ended up losing the cover. And me and Drew were talking off air, the probability of that team getting the ball first and covering a spread of over than a field goal is about 95%. So I'm just doing the math here, and I basically had a 1 in 400 chance of losing both of those bets. 0.25%, and it happened. So, I mean, what are you going to do? That's the NFL. I was with Suma on this Bengals over, which I texted him that there's a better chance of a meteor hitting the stadium than this game going over about midway through the game. So I mean, you got to take the highs with the lows. And but yeah, definitely watching that Perryman touchdown. That the high of winning the 49ers over to the low of that right away is just was a lot.
What a soft touchdown too.
I know. I mean, no one on that side of the field, right? And just outran the linebacker all the way to the end zone. So, but it was one of those where he caught the ball over the middle, and you're just like, okay, no one's there. Who's going to tackle him? No one's there. And he just kept running for a touchdown, but just pure pain. Oh, well, we move on.
Hey, Rob, I'll stick with you for a second on this one, right? Because I know you've often said in the past about betting early in the week in the NFL, right? But this week in particular, there's just been so many. Every time you look at your phone, there's a new COVID list. Some teams have put on special designation. It's been really tough this week. What's your strategy even though this week, and even probably looking ahead for the next 2 or 3 weeks? Are you just holding your fire, or what's the deal?
So I think everybody has a different risk appetite. For me, mine is a little bit higher than others. Others will like to wait on as much information as possible. The reality is, with this COVID situation, things can work in your favor or they can work against you. You might make an early bet in the week, and there's a 50-50 chance of whether or not a breakout's going to happen on either team, or an outbreak, I should say. So I wouldn't say stop betting early. You can still capitalize on some line value, and definitely, yes, there's going to be times where things work against you and it's going to be painful, but you're just as likely to have that bet work in your favor. The other thing I would say is, if you're waiting until last minute, the market is already adjusting to this COVID news. So it's going to be very difficult for you to parse all this data. You're looking at teams that have 17 players on a COVID list. The average NFL bettor does not know how to quantify that better than a professional who's already moved that market. So I would say, if you're not comfortable with risking things early, fine, but there's still an advantage to be had by getting down earlier in the week.
Drew, give your thoughts on this.
I completely agree with Rob. I think that was well said. And it's some of them are going to go with you. Some of them are going to go against you if you are totally in a vacuum, right? But beyond that, even we've seen a trend. One case leads to 8 cases. And if you have a side that you like, and the opponent has one COVID pop, then you want to take your shot then, expecting that, there may be more. I don't think that's completely out of the realm of reality. I've made a bunch of those bets this year, and that's actually been some of my better bets, if we're being honest. So ultimately, you can absolutely catch an advantage that way. And anyone that caught, what's a good example? But yeah, I mean, anyone that caught a little bit of information that the Browns were going through an issue, got a Raiders number early. You got a touchdown in your pocket right now. Yep. Those are the bets that come around once a year. So I think that is a fun angle of attack if you're going to try to fire into these markets, because the likelihood you're going to get the information before someone else out there is 0. You will not have it. I can promise you. And so Rob's point is fair in that regard. Was once it's public, unless you're making a speculative bet that other guys are going to get it, you're not really capturing any EV.
Yeah, absolutely. These markets are pretty efficient. So if you think you're going to get down, it won't happen, like Drew said. There's a couple of games. So the games we're going to cover today, they're maybe not the most marquee matchups, but however, there are some key injuries, obviously with Lamar Jackson and maybe even Josh Allen. But we're going to look at, first of all, the Bengals and the Broncos. Then we're going to look at the Falcons, 49ers, and a few more after that. But let's take a look at the betting as we have it in the Bengals and 49ers game. The Bengals and Broncos game. Even 2.36, you can back the Bengals. The Broncos 1.68. The Bengals getting a 3-point start of 1.89. 44.5 is the total. Drew Dinksick, take it away. Why should we be back in Cincinnati here? The market's kind of moving against you though slightly, isn't it?
Yeah. So maybe somebody knows Bengals got COVID.
Yeah, maybe.
No, I think again, this isn't the first time this has happened this season. In fact, this is deja vu all over again to Broncos Ravens week 4. Broncos play an absolute dregs of the league, look amazing, beat the pants off of them. People talk themselves into this team is legit. They play an actual bona fide NFL roster the next week, and they get beat. And I think that that happened week 1, 2, and 3. They played the worst of the NFL. The market got hot on them, and it was perfect time to sell high on them as they played the Ravens week 4. I think this is a very similar situation. I see a Bengals offense that is balanced. Zach Taylor is not my guy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like Bengals go to war with this team. They're amazing. Like Zach Taylor, they're probably long-term net negative if they make the playoffs this year and Zach Taylor sticks around. But we'll set that aside for a second. They at least are balanced in terms of they have legit, a legitimate rushing game. They have a legitimate set of weapons in the passing game. And that's what you need to be able to beat the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have an outstanding set of defensive backs, safeties. Those guys there's some all pros in there. There's some underrated guys in there. There's no doubt about that. But there are just enough weapons in the passing game. Burrow is just, is excellent at reading defenses, and in general, he'll take what the Broncos are going to give him in the running game with Mixon to the tune that I think the Bengals can get a lead in this one. And there are two very different Bengals teams. Bengals with a lead are dynamic. Like, they are great front runners. Bengals from behind, a little sketchy. We saw them come back last week with 14 fourth quarter points against the Niners. But that was the exception this season, not the rule. So I think the Bengals can get this game done. I think the Broncos are a hair overrated. There's nothing that I see as a positive matchup for the Broncos offensively against the Bengals defense. That's good, not great. Has a pass rush, can absolutely get some pressure on Teddy Bridgewater and company. So I think Bengals get a win here. And again, the market, just from a market standpoint, I expected this at least to be a Bengals -3 based on the look ahead. Bengals played a hard-fought game against the Niners. I didn't really downgrade them for that performance. Broncos beat the Lions' brains in. Like, the Lions coming off their first win of the season, what does that tell you about them at all? Not sure why this flipped so aggressively. And ultimately, I think this should probably be a pick 'em. So I'll take the Bengals here at plus money.
Yeah, but even if I gave you 3 at 1.9, Drew, would you take that +3?
I played this on the money line. I'll take whatever the best money line price is on this one personally.
All right, yeah. 2.36 currently. Suma, pick it up from there. The Bengals decide to be here. We've seen a lot of big groups supporting the Broncos a few times this season. I wonder, is that this money that's coming as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it was yesterday maybe. And the Broncos were about -2, and all of a sudden there was a major move. It can only be one of those big group moves that pushed the Broncos from like -2 to -2.5, -119 at one major sportsbook. And that was a pretty telling move that someone out there with a lot of money that can move lines likes the Broncos. To be honest, it's hard to get to +3 for me here. In general, I think the Bengals are kind of a fraud team, or let's say paper tiger. We've mentioned that statement several times on this podcast, I guess, because their defense is kind of overrated after playing a very light schedule, and their offense, like we saw last week, they have all the ingredients, but they are not really getting their shit together consistently. They're pretty inconsistent on offense. They could be so much better, in my opinion, if they just try to attack certain matchups instead of just running to a brick wall on early downs early in the first half and then trying to play catch up. They also struggled against good pass rushers like the Chargers with Joey Bosa early in the game. Then Bosa went out, and then at some point Joe Burrow had to hold the ball because they were trailing, and then the pass rush came in against a questionable offensive line. We saw that last week against the Niners again. Nick Bosa was absolutely going nuts. But the Broncos are not that kind of team that's very dominant on their defensive line. They have a sound scheme on defense. They play lots of off coverage, lots of those 2 high shells, cover 4 looks. So I think that the Bengals offensive line, if they are healthy, yesterday's injury report was pretty gross, to be honest, but they only had a work through. So if they are healthy at their offensive line, I like this matchup for them much better than what they have shown last week against the Niners, where they were consistently running the ball, couldn't run the ball at all against the Niners, and then they were put in those 3rd and long situations where Burrow had to make something going. I think against the Broncos, they should be a little bit better at running the ball. Burrow should have more time in the pocket. They might try to feed T. Higgins, who is absolutely boarding out right now on the outside. So I like that matchup for the Bengals. In general, I'm still a little bit cautious with the Bengals. Also, a long injury report. That's something to check out later today when they have their first real practice. But it's hard to get to +3, even though I'm very low on the Bengals.
Rob, Bengals are nothing here for you?
Yes, I agree. And now seeing the market at 3, I think that's a decent entry point. Obviously, I echo a lot of what Suma said here, and the Bengals injury report is a bit concerning right now. That's possibly why Denver has taken some early money in this game. But we're at a point now, and this is going to be the theme for, I think, a couple of games that we talk about today, where you either have to make the Broncos better than the Bengals on a neutral field, or you have to believe that they have some sort of exploitable matchup in this game that lends themselves to being in this price range. And I don't agree with either of those. DVOA does have Denver slightly ahead of Cincinnati, but they're very, very close. We know that there's limited home field advantage in the NFL nowadays. I think Cincinnati is a fraud as well, based on the fact that they've played a very easy schedule, but I'm not high on Denver either here. So ultimately, it's just very difficult for me to get to this number unless we start seeing a lot of Bengals get ruled out in this game. But even then, I probably would want to just take Cincinnati and wait for more money to pour in on Denver, because I don't think that they're a team that is built to cover as favorites against other good football teams. So I'm in agreement with the guys here. I'm not in the same camp as Drew in terms of I would rather play Cincy +3, because I can see a lot of scenarios where they lose this game by 3 points. But I think the value lies with the Cincinnati Bengals here.
Yeah. Okay. Drew, you spoke first. I'm going to take the money line here.
After hearing some dissenting opinion and looking at this lower total,
well, it wasn't dissenting
valuable,
opinion. Yeah, it wasn't dissenting opinion. It was just
dissenting opinion
cautious
about whether to take the money line.
Yeah.
Points.
Yeah.
And that's a fair point. And ultimately, I look at a lot of these questionable tags on some hugely important pieces, and everybody's hurt this time of year. None of this really scares me that much. If Riley Reef being out is a distinguishing factor in this game, then we got bigger problems. So, it's fun if we want to get involved with the +3 as opposed to the money line.
I think that's a good point too. It's not a bad Broncos team, but laying a number with them against a pretty decent Bengals team, I don't know, is that the way to go? So +3, the Bengals at 1.9. That is the bet. Next game we're going to look at is the Falcons at the San Francisco 49ers, and we'll take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com currently. Come back to Falcons here at 4.3. The 49ers at 1.26. The Falcons getting a 9-point start at 1.98. And 46.5 is the total. And Drew, I'm going to start with you first here again for this one, because I know from listening to the Deep Dive Pod on Monday morning, you guys played the Falcons. What number did you play? Did you play it was probably south of 9 anyway, was it?
Yeah, I think I'm in at 8.5, but I got a decent price on it. Yeah.
But explain the case. I know that there are slight COVID concerns over the Atlanta, because the team is obviously they're doing their Zoom meetings and they're under some sort of. But I actually haven't heard any major cases there. I could be wrong here, but who knows? Even but you still think there's a bit of value in this number.
Yeah, my fare here is 7, and it's relatively robust. I don't have a ton of uncertainty bands around either of these two teams. I think we know pretty much what to expect with both of these guys, and the matchup isn't ideal for the Falcons. Like in general, getting involved with the dog, I at least like to have some meaningful percentage of my expectation that they're going to win the game. And I think the money line in this one is actually pretty close, but I think the point spread is too high. I think these two teams are not distance apart more than a touchdown, and realistically the Falcons are pretty healthy right now. You look across their offense, the entire starting offensive unit is going to be able to go in this one. Cordell Patterson has been an amazing success story in the NFL so far this season in terms of him filling the role that Art Smith so desperately needed, because Art Smith apparently can only run one style of offense and needs that player to be available. But ultimately, the Matt Ryan kind of resurgence late in the season here, getting Russell Gage involved and getting it done with Olamide Zaccheaus and Kyle Pitts it's a cool story. And I think realistically they match up fairly well against the Niners defense. Niners defense has some issues in terms of defending the pass when you have heavy sets out there. And I think that's likely what you're going to see a lot of from Atlanta. And then on the flip side, you're getting near, I would actually consider AJ Terrell an all-pro so far this season in terms of the play where he's putting on the field at the cornerback position. And if he can take away, either Ayuk or Samuel in this one, that's huge in terms of getting the worst out of Jimmy Garoppolo. Tough to put a fair tough to put a fair handicap on him. He will have some air balls in this one. He'll have some poor passes. And if the Falcons can take advantage of that, then I think they actually have a puncher's chance to win outright. San Francisco, I think, is pretty firmly in the playoff mix in the NFC. Atlanta is not considering their season lost at this point. They still have an outside chance to steal a wild card spot. So slight motivational edge here in terms of Atlanta. Realistically, I don't know that there really are many teams in this miasma of the middle of the NFC that are more than a touchdown apart in terms of ultimate quality and this time of season. Some of the uncertainty swirling around whose will be available. I don't mind having a big dog like the Falcons.
Yeah, like the angle. Suma, I'm not totally sure if you have an opinion on this side, but you see there's a smidgen of value on the over here. The total is 46.5 currently.
Yeah, exactly. So the over would probably be my only look because I'm around market for the spread. I think the over could be a decent look. It's already moving towards the key number of 47 already. But in general, I think this could be a matchup where the 49ers offense can do whatever they want with the Falcons defense because you can isolate AJ Terrell on the outside. Then I think there's no one else who can stop Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and the Niners run game. The Falcons are 32nd in the league at generating pressure. Jimmy G is night and day with and without pressure, so that's an advantage for the Niners offense. The Falcons defense will be without their starting safety Eric Harris. Cornerback Fabian Moreau is likely about 50-50 to play this week. So the defense that's already very bad is also getting injured in the secondary. And I think from that perspective, the over and the Falcons spread might be a little bit correlated, so to speak, because I think you need the Falcons to score if you want to bet on the Falcons. And we also need something going from the Falcons offense if you want to hit the over, because at some point the Niners could just sit back and lean on their run game. And then it will make it very hard for the Falcons to air it out and maybe get some kind of a backdoor cover. One concern for me for both the Falcons and the over is that for whatever reason, Arthur Smith keeps running the ball on first down, even though they are like the worst offense at running the ball right now. But he keeps pounding the ball on early down, on first down specifically. Then they try to air it out on second and third down. And you are playing against a 49ers defense that, what we saw last week, is pretty stout against the run. So the Falcons, if they don't change their offensive approach at all, they will be running into a brick wall on first down. And then we have to rely completely on Matt Ryan to air it out on second and third down. I mean, with Kyle Pitts and Patterson, you have some matchup advantages against the secondary, what Drew has mentioned. So in the past game, the Falcons should get something going. But my concern for both bets, the Falcons and the over, would be that the Falcons offense just stupidly runs on first down. And at some point, the lead for the Niners will be too high. And then Matt Ryan starts making some mistakes, and we don't get the Falcons cover or the over.
Yeah, Rob, wrap it up for us there. What you think of it? But there's obviously, there's a lean there for the over, and there's obviously Drew's bet on the Falcons +9. Any of those tickle your fancy in any way?
Neither, really. Not that I disagree with either.
Yeah.
I just think that this is an accurately priced game. I think with the 49ers, I generally never want to lay the points with them as big favorites at home. This has kind of been, listen, I mean, it can be complete noise, but for some reason or another, under Kyle Shanahan at home, this team just doesn't cover spreads. I don't know what it is. It's like 20 games now, and he's covered like 3 of them at home. Maybe there's something to it in their preparation. I don't know. But the challenge for me is Atlanta has been one of those teams this year where they have feasted. They haven't even feasted, like they're below 500, but they've played a very easy schedule. They've only played 4 teams with a winning record all season long. And when you look at those games, well, they lost by 23 and 13 to the Bucs. They lost by 40 to Dallas. They lost by 25 to the Patriots. That's it. Every time they've had a step up in class, they've gotten blown out. And I think the 49ers are kind of ascending. The offense is getting better. I feel like this is a team that's rounded into form offensively against a defense that doesn't have much of a pass rush, missing Eric Harris, like Suma said, potentially down a cornerback as well. It's just a tough game for me overall. I just don't have a strong opinion one way or another.
Tell you what the Falcons do have. They have like a 7-choice wide receiver playing running back, and it's going to work. So they got that.
Wow.
They have that.
7th. Oh my goodness.
Oh, where was he when he played with Minnesota? He was definitely well done. He was a punt returner, so I don't know. He's been great. He has been
What
great
I hear is he can do it all. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can do it all.
Versatile.
Yeah, no, he's been very good. He's been really good. He seems to love that offense. So it does work. All right, Drew, I'm going to back you here, Falcons +9, because you know what? +9, we could get a couple of 49ers COVID cases, and we could be getting +5, +4 pretty quickly.
And then they'll lose by 35. So that's perfect.
Let's be honest about it. This is not going to be our strongest selection of the week, but I know just further down the pipe here, we haven't got that many selections given the week that's in it. So let's take it anyway. Falcons +9, 1.98. By the way, Joe, I never gave your kudos at the top. Great show on the Atlanta money line for last week.
I know. I should have.
That was superb.
Oh well.
And we did the whole Cam Newton scoring first. You know where he always scores first because they can script up the plays. Yeah. And he's doing his whole celebration. You're thinking, oh no, is it going to be one of those Cam days? It never is anymore. Let them score first. Live bet the other team. It's the way to go. It's the absolute way to go. All right. That's the Cam bashing done. We've done that a couple of weeks now in succession. Next game is Tennessee at Pittsburgh. The current betting, as we have it at matchbook.com, is as is. The Titans. Slight favorites of 1.89. The Steelers at 2.02. Steelers getting a 1 point start at 1.95. 42.5 at 1.92. With face favoring the over. Rob Pizzola, start with you first for this one. Answer me a question. Are the Tennessee Titans the most fraudulent 9-14 that you will ever come across in your lifetime or my lifetime?
They have to be up there. With that said, if they were healthy and they were at full strength, I think they're probably deserving of this record. But yes, when you look at recently what they've done since they've had the injuries to Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown, offensively, they've just been brutal. I mean, if you look at their last 5 games, their yards per play is around 4.5. It's been a horrible offense, 22nd in EPA per play since Derrick Henry went down. And I look at this Steelers team. There's this pretty consistent theme of the Steelers being shredded on the ground whenever they have to respect the opposing team's passing game. I mean, that's been the key to success in recent weeks for the Chargers and the Bengals. The Vikings last week diced them on the ground. But this Tennessee pass offense is so lost right now, even with Julio Jones back last week. I feel like the Steelers just come out and they stack the box here and they say, okay, try to beat us in the passing game and see if that happens. And I just don't know that they're capable of doing that right now because, like, we've watched the Steelers a lot this year, and we know how painful it is watching Big Ben in the pocket and watching this Steelers passing game. The Steelers passing DVOA right now is actually ahead of Tennessee's, just to put things into perspective of how far this Tennessee pass offense has fallen off of a cliff. On defense, Tennessee's pressure rates have been declining pretty steadily. Their pass rush win rate, which was very high early in the year, is now down to league average. So they're kind of declining on both sides of the ball. Going into the year, none of us would have been impressed with Tennessee's defense. They surprised us early on. They're now playing, I guess, closer to what we think their talent level is. The offense has fallen off. I just feel like, I mean, this is a Steelers or nothing game. It's actually one of the weeks where I wish I could just keep fading both of these teams and they happen to play each other. But the Steelers, one last thing I'll say about it, and I'm not a trends guy. I don't like to bring it up. I brought it up with Kyle Shanahan, but the Mike Tomlin, like, home dog thing, this is like a huge sample now of not only the Steelers as home dogs, but just the Steelers at home and the Steelers as dogs under Mike Tomlin. And they cover spreads in these types of situations. It's not playing into my number at all, but I think it's something to consider whenever betting the Steelers. Maybe they have a larger home field advantage, let's say, than potentially other teams in the league in this type of spot. So Pittsburgh or nothing for me, but it's very likely not going to get my money this week.
I know that Drew has a bet in this one, but first of all, before I go to Drew, Suma, if again, similar kind of angle here, Rob, I don't think you're betting this game, but if you had to go into the head, it would be most likely to be Tennessee for you.
Yeah, the line would need to move a little bit further for my taste, but matchup-wise, I kind of like the Titans a little bit here because I think the Titans want to run the ball, and then they try to get anything going off of it. And that's basically exactly what the Vikings did to the Steelers last week. The Steelers' run defense has been very lousy for several weeks now. I think there's a path to success for the Titans running the ball, and then the Pittsburgh secondary doesn't have enough firepower, in my opinion, to contain Julio Jones if Tannehill is able to get something going over the top. So I think the Titans offense might quietly have a decent matchup there. And on the other side, I mean, the Pittsburgh passing offense actually better efficiency-wise than what the media opinion is, like Rob has pointed out, but it's still hard for me to trust the passing offense at all. The Titans quietly have a decent secondary with Kevin Byard and Christian Fulton. Their defensive line, even though they have been declining, that offensive line from the Steelers some fits here. Overall, I just like the matchup for the Titans a little bit more than I like for the Steelers, but the number would need to move a little bit more for me to get involved.
All right, Drew, take it away. You're going to play a total there. The over you played. It's 42.5 currently a match point. I think you've got a slightly better number, but it's 1.93 or 42 to the over.
Yeah. Between the two sides, I agree more with Rob in that this is a Steelers or pass type of a game. I made this a pick. There's actually some markets that moved to a pick, it looks like, out there. So the twos, the ones, they're disappearing. And again, there's not much that you can say that it's about the love of the Steelers. This is entirely about the Titans really just aren't very good. And the Titans have gotten where they've gotten thanks to some pretty outlier positive performances against the best teams in the league earlier in the season when they were a lot healthier. And realistically, this Titans defense is still exploitable in a bunch of ways. And they haven't played a tough opponent in a while. And so people have kind of forgotten that, you go up against a team that has their back against the wall, that's at home, that can get fired up, that has a veteran coach, that has a veteran quarterback. I could entirely see the Steelers playing up in this spot and really kind of dictating this game. But the over was the better look for me here. And it's mostly because in the same sense that I find that the Titans defense is wildly overrated, I agree with Suma that the Steelers defense looks pretty soft as well. And realistically, you have you've had a number of weeks, if you're the Titans, to kind of work on some of your secondary pieces, try to get them up to game speed, figure out what works in your passing attack beyond, because earlier this season, a lot of the success of the Titans was AJ Brown in the lineup. Was he able to get the game open with on those play action routes running across the middle of the field? Like that was such a predictable and, kind of break glass in case of emergency play for that offense. And now that they don't have it, they stall out all the time. I would say, though, that this over is still a fair play. Expecting this to be, two relatively successful offensive performances here against defenses that the market is overrating. A lot of the success of both of these teams, I feel like, is a little bit unsustainable luck-based stuff. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are dealing with a number of injuries on defense. The loss of Stephon Tuitt, the loss of Alu over the balance of the season has really hurt their run defense. And I just in general, I think that both of these offenses are going to find success in this one. And with this super, super low total, there's a game state issue here as well from the total standpoint. Like if the Titans take a lead in this one, like the Steelers cannot afford to lose a game and still expect to make it to the playoffs. So you're going to see a pretty aggressive approach from them. They're going to have their hands going to be forced going 4 on 4th down, just like they did against the Vikings last week. And, realistically, that could blow this game wide open from a scoring standpoint.
Over 42.5. So is the bet there 1.93. Let me just kick something out there. So we'll just play it forward in a hypothetical game. The Titans are either a number 1 or 2 seed in the AFC. The divisional game. They play either the likes, so we'll just say for argument's sake, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Ravens, maybe the Browns, maybe the Bengals, the Colts. Are they favorites in any of those games? In Nashville, obviously.
Well, they are very likely. Well, I don't want to say very likely, but they could have Derrick Henry back. So that's got to be into consideration.
Okay.
AJ Brown will be back in the lineup. So we will be looking at a full-strength Titans team in that game. But let's use the Bills Monday Nighter as an example, right? The Titans close as a 6-point underdog in that game. Now, if there's a rematch, they're not closing as a 6-point underdog, but they're still closing as an underdog, whether that's 3.5, 4, whatever it is. So I do think that potentially if they were to get the Colts in a game at home, they'd be a small favorite in that game. So I think there's situations where they are favored at full strength. but for the majority of those games, they're an underdog.
I think I'd like to back them with the Colts, if the Colts are dogs there. Yeah, I would like to. Anyway, we'll kick that forward the next couple of weeks. Be interested to see how it comes. I think people were saying that before, that you might get a bit of value because they're top seed, but I think the market is very efficient. It doesn't really look at that, and it's like, yeah, whatever. You're not going to get easy points there.
Real quick in the AFC, I was talking to Andy about this last night. It is entirely possible that you have Chiefs as the 5 seed, Bills as the 6 seed, Colts as the 7 seed. And those 3 teams as wild cards would be your 1, 2, and 3 in the AFC outright market. And nuts. So basically the market is saying, well, one of these 3 teams is going to win 3 games on the road. We don't know who, but that's probably where we're headed here. Assuming, obviously there's a lot of games left to play and a lot of teams play each other here, but it does seem like the Titans are driving for a 1 or 2 seed here. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if you have Titans Colts part 3 as your 2-7 matchup, and even a full strength Titans team as a pick 'em in that game.
Good stuff. All right, fun times ahead. Speaking of which, Saturday night football is back. See, the college season. Those bowl games aren't good enough this week to dislodge the NFL. So let's take a look at the Patriots at the Colts. The late game on Saturday night. You can back the Patriots here at 2.16. The Colts at 1.79. Patriots getting a 2.5 point start in the main handicap line at 1.94. 46 is the total. Summa. We backed the Patriots about an hour ago. Why so, sir?
Yeah, so first of all, it feels like the whole world is on the Colts, so I'm either a genius or a complete fool. However, I just cannot get to the Colts being favorites over the Patriots, even if they're at home. I mean, home field advantage is very little. It's not any kind of certain weather condition. It's a dome. Both teams are off at least 12 days of rest. So, and what I will address soon, I also cannot identify any major matchup advantages or more matchup advantages for the Colts, which would lead me to installing them as favorites over the Patriots. There was also that narrative that in that Monday Night Football game, Bill Belichick would hide his quarterback. That they are a one-first offense, and he's not even allowing Mac Jones to throw in the fourth quarter. He doesn't trust his quarterback, etc., etc. And I just would say let's throw out this game out of the window completely.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at all. And if we just take a look at what the Patriots offense specifically has accomplished over the course of the season. So everyone says they are one first offense. They want to run the ball, and then Mac Jones can do some things off of it. But since week 4, and that was their home game against Tampa Bay, it was a little bit rainy, a little bit windy, but it was basically the first game where the Patriots offense looked to be in a rhythm, and they had a lot of quick strikes down the field, etc. And since that game, among all 32 offenses, the Patriots dropback game ranks first in EPA per dropback, first in yards per dropback, second in success rate, in passing success rate, and first in completion percentage over expectation. The Patriots have been the number 1 passing offense in terms of efficiency since week 4. And I mean, that's just a straight fact. And now they are playing against a Colts defense that has their weaknesses against the pass. The Colts are a very good defense against the run, but they are extremely vulnerable against the pass. They are below average in DVOA and EPA per dropback over the course of the season, despite playing a very easy schedule. And the Patriots offense, while accomplishing all those great efficiency numbers, have actually played an average schedule of opposing defenses. They have faced the Panthers defense, the Cowboys defense, that's pretty good against the pass. So they have not entirely faced a cupcake schedule. So the passing offense from the Patriots is actually legit. Their offensive line is completely healthy right now, and the Colts are the Colts defense has the 3rd lowest blitz rate in the league, the 3rd lowest pressure rate in the league, and the Pats have a very good pass protection up front. So the Colts don't even have a good pass rush to make Jones pretty uncomfortable in the pocket. And Mac Jones has been balling out from clean pockets this year. He has I think he has a 89 passing rate from a clean pocket. And I would guess that he will have a lot of clean pockets in that game unless they completely fall behind and he has to add out at some point. But and another point, yes, the Colts have a good run defense that might give the Patriots fits, but Bill Belichick has also always shown us tendencies that he attacks opposing mismatches or certain matchup advantages. And earlier in the year, they faced the Saints defense and the Bucs defense, 2 top 5 run defenses. And guess what? The Patriots had at least 70% pass rate on early downs in those matchups. So I don't think that the Patriots go into this matchup after a bye week to prepare and say, hey, we're just going to run the ball against a pretty good Colts run defense. So I would expect them to be at least kind of balanced, maybe lean a little bit more towards the pass. And then they are facing a Colts defense that is pretty conservative. Like I said, not a high blitz rate, lots of too high shells. They want to keep the game in front of them. And that's exactly the kind of defense that the Patriots want to play against. They want to hit a lot of quick strikes. They want to hit their guys underneath. And that's exactly the kind of defense that presents lots of matchup advantages for them. So in this matchup, I'm pretty high on the Pats offense. I think their passing game in general going into this week might be underrated. Maybe it's a little bit of a false narrative of that Monday Night Football game, but I think their passing offense is pretty legit and they will have success against the Colts defense. And then on the other side, the Colts have the number one offense in the league. They have also looked pretty good over the course of the season. Carson Wentz is healthy. Their offensive line is healthy. T.Y. Hilton is healthy. Their offense has also looked pretty good. But then the question is, what will the Patriots try to take away from them? They might take away Jonathan Taylor. And we were talking about the Colts defense being pretty good against the run. The Patriots defense is averaging almost the exact same efficiency numbers against the run than the Colts, and they have played the exact same strength of schedule in terms of opposing rush offenses. So the Patriots, they have a pretty good front seven, big bodies up front, Dante Hightower, big dudes at linebacker. They can play nickel with their linebackers. I think they will not get run over all game by Jonathan Taylor. And then it all comes down, do I trust Carson Wentz to attack this Bill Belichick passing defense, or do I trust Mac Jones against the Colts defense more? And I give the edge to the Pats here. Overall, I've rated the Pats higher than the Colts. And even with home field advantage, I cannot really get to Colts being favorites here. I might be alone with that, or at least I've seen many guys on the Colts so far. But I just think that the current market number, it has moved a little bit, but the market number in general might be underweighting the Pats here.
Yeah, it's 2.16 comprehensive breakdown and pretty convincing one there from Suma. Rob, in agreement with the Patriots as the side?
I am. So this is very similar to the Bengals Broncos for me. Either you have to make the Colts a better team than the Patriots on a neutral field, which I think is not the case, or you have to think that the Colts have some sort of exploitable matchup against the Patriots here, which I agree with a lot of what Suma just said in that breakdown, and I don't see it. And I think what's happening here is a lot of people have talked themselves into like trying to catch the market top on the Patriots. Like everyone's like, oh, got to sell on the Patriots, a lot of these misleading wins, but the price matters on the game. Like, sure, I'd love to bet against the Patriots if they were a 3-point favorite in this game and take the Colts getting 3 at home. That's not the case. We've come to the point where it's like the Patriots are still very, very undervalued. And I think a couple of other things that are misleading in this matchup, the Colts run defense is very good, but they actually give up a lot of explosive runs. They're 21st in the league in explosive run rate allowed this year. The Patriots are 4th in explosive runs. We saw this in that Monday Night Football game against Buffalo. They'll hand it off for 1 or 2 yards at the time, but then they're going to break one. And that's been the case for the Patriots a lot this year. And the Colts do give that up. So despite the fact that their metrics are good, they do give up long runs. Then just on the other side of things, I don't know like why people are hung up on the Patriots need to run the ball to win. Like, I really don't believe that at all. I think Mac Jones has a very good pass blocking offensive line against a defensive front that doesn't generate pressure. 3rd worst pressure rate in the entire league. He's going to have lots of time to throw the ball. It's not like the Colts have a very deep secondary. They don't anymore. So I just don't see where these matchup advantages are coming from. It's going to be a lot of Carson Wentz having to look for some 50-yard defensive pass interference flags down the field, in my opinion, in this game. And maybe he gets some more of those. Who knows? Reproducing the Joe Flacco from a decade ago. But ultimately, no, I don't think this is the right number on this game. I like the Patriots quite a bit.
All right, Drew. You played the over here. 45 is 45 and a half. It's 46 currently.
Yeah, in general, I don't agree with the guys. And it's always a head scratcher when you have a look ahead that had Patriots -3, or 2.5, and neither team plays, both off of bye. And for whatever reason, the market has shifted so aggressively in favor of the Colts. And I get it. Like, I think Rob actually nailed it. There's just sentiment that out there in the market, people are desperate to sell the top on the Patriots. And this is not the good time to do it because the Colts defense is not great and they match up poorly against the Patriots offense. And so this is going to be a points game, in my opinion. I think both of these teams get to 24. I'm surprised that the total is as low as it is. I got down a little on a look ahead 44. I took more at 45. I played more at 45 and a half. So I am now pretty heavily invested in this over. And realistically, this is probably my favorite total on the board. The Patriots defense is a tough handicap for me because their strength of opponent has been so weak this season. They have really, really not played anyone. And, the handful of, they finally get a tough test against Josh Allen and it's in 40-mile-an-hour winds, so it's you don't have a fair grade at all if you use this season's data to try to come up with a number for these Patriots. And while they have had standout individual performances from the likes of Judon and JC Jackson, there are soft spots. There are players on this, Patriots defense that you can attack. And I think Frank Reich with 2 weeks to prepare is going to have a nice game plan here. And I think in general, the balanced attack that they're going to roll out with Jonathan Williams and some of the weapons starting to get healthy, particularly in the wide receiver room for the Colts is it good enough to keep them in this game? Ultimately, do they win? I don't know. I think this is probably going to be decided late by whoever kind of comes up with the key stop on 4th down or hits the team with the ball last type of deal kind of wins. But either way, this total was shockingly low in the open, starting to get close. And as long as it's under 47, I think it's still a fair play to the over.
Rob, jump back in.
Yeah, Drew mentioned something there that I think a lot of people are making that argument for the Colts this week is that the New England schedule has been really easy this season. They faced a lot of teams in situations that benefited them. The exact same thing can be said about the Colts. Like if you look at Indianapolis's wins this season, they've beat Miami, Houston, San Fran, the Jets, the Jags, the Bills, and the Texans. So they're two good wins. Their 2 good wins were San Fran and Buffalo. Both of those were inclement weather games, which is very conducive to what the Colts want to do, which is run the ball, and they're very good at it. So I would argue that they've beaten nobody this season unless it was in a position that really benefited them. So that's just another thing for me. Yes, the Patriots have not beaten anyone, but they're really winning games convincingly for the most part. Yeah. And I think that matters.
Hey, you know what? Who tipped the Patriots 36.0 after week 10? I know they're 8.8. I just have to get that in there. But you know what? That is the beauty of the exchange, that you can outlay them probably at that, and probably in the next couple of weeks, maybe 6.0, 5.0 if they get to pass the first round of the playoffs. Be interesting to see. Sorry, guys, a bit of after timing there, but I did flag it. I did flag it that week. I will say that. So
they win this game, they might be already into the second week of the playoffs, Sully.
Yeah, see. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. All right, two bets there, I think, guys. The Patriots 2.16, and let's take over 46 at 1.96. I'll recap the other games in a second. So let's look at it. And we have the Bengals +3 at 1.9, the Falcons +9 at 1.98. That's not going to be our biggest bet, just so you know. The Titans and Steelers, we're going to take over 42.5 at 1.93. And we just touched on their 2 bets on Saturday night, the late game. Patriots 2.16 and over 46 at 1.96. Check out insights.matchbook.com for a full recap of all of those bets and our other podcasts as well, because we do rattle through them fairly quickly here. And if you don't have a matchbook.com account, and if you do want to sign up, use the bonus code NFL NFL20 when signing up to get a free £20 or dollars or euro free bet. So use the bonus code NFL20 when signing up to avail of that offer. If you want to check out the terms and conditions of that offer, you can check that out at matchbook.com/promo/NFL20. Drew, the primetime game on Sunday night, the Saints head to Tampa to take on the Bucks. A lot of points, 11 they're getting currently at 1.94 at matchbook.com. You think they can keep it relatively close?
It's a lot of points.
It is.
And it's a matchup that has not fared well for the Bucks, despite on paper they ought to be able to do well against this team. But for whatever reason, the Saints defense has Brady's number. They the coverage has been able to take Mike Evans out of this game with one player every single time they've gone head to head. I don't know that any of that changes in this contest. Ultimately, the Bucks have been playing a bit of a we'll just get enough to win a lot of these games this season. Like, they've gotten backdoored a handful of times. Like, the only teams that they've really thoroughly dismantled were the likes of the Bears and Justin Fields with the 4 or 5 turnovers. I lost count there. And so it's it's not my most confident look by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think the market is a little bit sleepy here on exactly how good the Saints defense is, particularly against this particular opponent.
All right. We're on to best bets time. Rob Pizzola, the Eagles laying 7 at home to Washington at 1.93.
I do. I like the Eagles a lot. Now, it should be noted that there's even more COVID situations for Washington in the last hour or so here. So this number is going to drift even further, probably to somewhere like 8.5. I'm going to just come out and say I still like the Eagles at that price. We're talking about upwards of 20 players for Washington that have COVID. This is basically like the Eagles are playing a week 4 preseason game, except they've decided they're going to start their starters and Washington is not. And Washington has huge cluster injuries in certain spots. They're not going to have a center this week. All their centers are currently on the COVID list. Their defensive line is in complete shambles, not only the starting defensive linemen, but the backups as well. There's just going to be no one pressuring the quarterback there. And then you look at some key position injuries that are non-COVID related as well for Washington as well, on the offensive side of the ball, where they could potentially be missing guys like Terry McLaurin as an example. And this is essentially like the Eagles playing the worst team in the league for this week only. And the market is continuing to push towards Philadelphia. I don't think that they have pushed far enough yet. If you could still find a 7, absolutely, that's a banger. But anything under 10, I'd say at this point is still worth playing.
Yeah, the 7 is clinging on at matchbook.com at 1.93. I knew there wasn't going to be the whole show that we could get through without getting some COVID. There was no way we were going to get 56 or 57 minutes without more COVID updates. But
crazy how Washington football team has this bad karma. It's almost like they're cursed or something. That this game that they desperately need to win to keep their playoff hopes alive and to keep those over wins total ticket holders' hopes alive, and everyone gets COVID. What a bummer.
Yes, which was such sympathy and passion, and yeah, I love it, Drew. Thanks for that. So Matt, you made such a good case for the Patriots. I'm not at all surprised that this is your best bet of the week, but
yeah, sticking to it. When I can make a best bet at a good price with Bill Belichick and the Patriots, I just have to do it.
All right. Drew, wrap it up for us. Your best bet, Seahawks plus 4.5. Obviously, this line is coming up from 7. Something to do, of course, with COVID again. But look, NFC West underdogs, they do tend to cover.
Yeah, they have. They've been winning outright. If you've just been blind betting the dogs in the NFC West on the money line, you have a nice little pot of money this season. The angle here is simply the market has been slow to catch up to the fact that the Seahawks and Russell Wilson are now back to a much healthier state. This team is, they're without their amazing trade acquisition, Jamal Adams. But other than that, this team is basically at full strength, and fair price between these two teams is under a field goal, as it is with basically any matchup that you can line in the NFC West. So happy to take the +4.5, get me outside of a field goal here. On top of that, you have a Rams team that, as you mentioned, is on a short week, coming off a huge win in division, and also is dealing with a ton of disruption in terms of their preparation as they have COVID going around the building. So decent look here for Seattle, who has been one of the healthier teams. Least COVID impacted teams throughout the pandemic, and happy to take them as a dog in this spot. Russell Wilson is going to have to get it done for them because realistically the matchup's not ideal, and the Seahawks probably aren't going to ultimately get the win and go to the playoffs, but at 4.5, I backed this at 7 and it moved on the COVID news. I still like it at 4.5.
All right, they may not be infected and they may be healthy, but they still got Pete Carroll. But all right, I like the angle at 4.5 is the number there at 1.96. Yeah, he's surely only another year or two left in him, you'd imagine, you'd hope. All right, guys, a lot of fun. Don't forget if you're watching us, I see a lot of people on the YouTube channel today. Sorry, I wasn't able to get to a lot of your comments, but please give us a thumbs up. Click the subscribe button, or if you're listening to us in your preferred podcast app, please leave us a preferential review. We will never put this content behind a paywall, but obviously if you just give us a review, that'll be much appreciated, and we'll call it quits thereafter. A lot of fun, guys. We're hoping to be back at our usual time next week, but who knows, in all honesty, if we'll even have games. I presume we will, but it'll be fine. And on that note, I will say goodbye to Drew, Rob, Suma. Terrific effort as always, guys. Check out insights.matchbook.com for a full recap of all these bets and all of our other podcasts. Until next week, best of luck with your Week 15 bets, and goodbye for now.